All right, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us for tonight's WaterWatch lecture. My name is Brian Taylor, and I work for the North and South Rivers Watershed Association. I know that a lot of you are probably familiar and or members of the organization, but if you're not familiar with the NSRWA, we are a small local nonprofit whose mission is to preserve and protect our most valuable natural resource through education, engagement, scientific monitoring and research. We strive to ensure healthy waters for the community, for people, for wildlife, for now and for the future. So since 1970, we've been working hard to ensure our mission, healthy waters for the communities all along the South Shore and beyond. So thanks so much for coming to our lecture series. And before we begin, I'd like to give a shout out to our sponsors for sponsoring these educational programs. So thanks so much to Clean Harbors, as well as the Massachusetts Cultural Councils of Scituate, Hanover, Marshfield, Pembroke, Rockland, Plymouth, and Duxbury. Thanks so much for your continued support of educational programs like this. So we've got a exciting program tonight. I will say our guest tonight is having a little bit of audio troubles right now, so hopefully he will come back in a moment and rejoin. And so everything was working fine just a moment ago, but we all know how those computer issues go. So, but for the time being, this is a partnership between the North-South Rivers as well as Mass Audubon. And so tonight we are joined by Mass Audubon's representative, Jackie Schuster. So Jackie, I have a slide that I'll pull up for some of Mass Audubon's exciting programs that I will share here. And if you want to say a little hello to the crew here and anything you'd like to share, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Brian. So I'm Jackie Schuster. I am the regional camp director for the Southeast region of Mass Audubon. So I focus a lot of my time doing nature camp programming, working with children and the other youths of the community. Another big focus that I have is just kind of community engagement in general. So hopefully I'll be seeing, if you guys are local, I'll be seeing y'all out in the town of Marshfield and the surrounding areas. In front of you, you'll be able to see a slide that has a few of our offerings. I know the big thing right now, because it's winter, is owl prowl. So we do have some owl prowl programming available, as you can see, and other options. This is mostly our adult programming. We do have some family or all ages programs as well. The first Wednesday of the month, I do a sensory friendly days at North River, and that is from 1 to 3. You can find it on our website, and it's just a free, like, you can pop in, and I have a bunch of activities, some biofacts and other cool things, and it's just kind of an open house. So just want to give a shout out to that, as well as our nature camp, North River Nature Camp. It is a day camp that runs for the summer season. So check that out as well if you have any youths that you want to get out into nature during the summer program. Yeah, and that is all. That's my big spiel. So I could always talk more if you want me to just keep going until Blake comes in, but I'm super psyched to hear about mosquitoes tonight. So
Yeah, yeah, me too. Um, yeah, thanks, Jackie. There is a partnership between, well, obviously the North and South Rivers and Mass Audubon partner quite often. And there is a birding program coming up next week, Thursday morning, in a partnership. And so we will be meeting at the North River Sanctuary, Mass Audubon's North River Sanctuary, and heading offsite to do some morning birding. So those are always super fun. But really, Mass Audubon, a lot of fantastic programming. So it's always great to partner with you guys. So thanks, Jackie, for being here tonight.
no, thanks for having us. It's always so much fun to be a part of the WaterWatch series.
Yeah, but we are joined tonight by Blake Dinius, who is the Plymouth County Entomologist here with Plymouth County Extension and Plymouth County 4-H. He's done a lot of educational programs in and around the South Shore, a lot of really cool outdoor programs, community engagement, as well as tick research. So Blake's position here in the South Shore is incredibly important, and we are so excited to be joined by him. He's done many programs for this WaterWatch lecture series for many years. So thanks so much, Blake, for joining us once again. You should be able to share your screen, and I will just let you go ahead and take it away unless you need a moment.
Great. Thank you all for joining. So glad to be here. Thanks for waiting and holding out. Tonight's presentation was a little bit different. I wanted to put something together that was kind of taking a different look at the typical mosquito outreach that most people see and hear, and that maybe you're inundated with all the stuff about protecting against bites and how bad are mosquitoes. So, I thought it would be interesting to do something different and talk about what good are mosquitoes, and can we change that perspective? And to be perfectly honest, I'm not sure. I don't know, but I put this together mostly as a philosophical kind of teaser, as kind of something that kind of play around within our heads, that maybe we could love something that might be like the bad guy, or might be, and it's still part of nature, right? So, and I really was thinking about this mostly because um, I kind of talk about mosquito bite prevention ad nauseum. So this was a little bit more fun, a fun exercise for me as well. But I do have a little bit of a disclaimer at the start of this. Again, it's more designed as a philosophical argument, and I'm not in any way advocating that we stop mosquito control, because there are, especially in parts of the world where things like malaria pose very real and serious dangers, right? Again, this is just to kind of get us to think a little bit more about mosquitoes. And I'm hoping that at the end of this, you guys kind of walk away thinking about, well, maybe they're just a little bit different than I initially thought when I joined this. So let's talk for a bit. Let's start at the basics, right? What are mosquitoes, right? So mosquitoes are flies. For the most part, they look like your typical brown, drab fly. I think the closest comparison to a mosquito would be a midge. But you can separate mosquitoes from other flies by the presence of their scaled wings. They've got scales along the veins of their wings and along the fringes and basically the tops. And they also have their proboscis. So they got this long pointy end, which we all know what that end is used for. Um, and like flies, they only have two wings. So you can see, maybe it's a little bit tricky to see in this photo, but they've got a set of halteres, which are modified back wings, that aren't really true wings. They're more to function in stabilizing the insect as it flies through the air. So they're they're actually one of the most advanced insects, believe it or not, out there. They're quite old. They're probably older than birds and mammals, excuse me. Uh, they are estimated to be about 70 to 230 million years old, but we do have a fossil from dating back to 130 million years ago. So I think that estimate of the 70 should probably be about 130 to 230 million years old. So it's that's pretty significant, and they've been, believe it or not, feeding on blood pretty much the entire time, probably on dinosaurs as well. And I like to bring this up. So that was a mosquito that they found in amber. It's not, the photo that they show in Jurassic Park of John Hammond looking at the bug trapped in amber, that's actually a crane fly. So it's not even a mosquito that they're trying to get dino DNA out of. It's a crane fly, an insect that doesn't feed on blood. So as a kind of cheeky entomologist, you always like to point that out to people when they go watching that movie and ruin it for everyone. They're holometabolous insects, which means they go through a complete metamorphosis: egg, larva, pupa, and adult. And for the most part, all four of those stages are tied to water. Sure, the adults fly around for a good amount of time. We see them, we spot them, but they're going to be laying eggs near the water, and they're going to be associated with water habitats. The larvae are exclusively found in water, pupa, and they even emerge from the water, right? Their eggs are laid on water. On water or near an area that could be flooded or contain water at some point. Mosquitoes are diverse. They have a diverse flight ranges, breeding sites, habitat preferences, biting and host-seeking behavior, and they're found virtually everywhere on Earth except for Antarctica. So you can find mosquitoes pretty much everywhere. And I do want to go into exactly what everywhere means, because it's actually a shocking number of places that these mosquitoes like to go. Maybe as a little tangent, I was once talking to this guy, and he moved out to this place. I think it was in New Hampshire, and he was like, "I moved out here to get close to nature. What do you do about the mosquitoes?" And I'm like, you're with nature. And then mosquitoes are part of nature. That is what comes with the territory, right? They're gonna be pretty much everywhere. Um, we have mosquitoes are very diverse, right? So we have 3,578 species of mosquito worldwide, 51 or so in Massachusetts. I know there are some people in mosquito control that do think there are about 52 in Mass, and I'm sure that's going to change with climate change as more warm weather species move further north. We're going to see some shifts, so that number is going to change a little bit. But there's a lot. That's a large number of when you really think about it. And they, again, for the most part, look fairly drab, but you do have some fairly pretty ones. This is one of my favorites. It's Seraphia ferox. I like it. It's got this nice green kind of Ray-Ban glasses, and you see these purple leg warmers and high white socks on the back feet. It's just kind of a very charismatic mosquito. And yeah, some of them look pretty drab. That one's pretty. That's a Eurytania sapphirina. But the shocking thing that even surprised me, and I knew that not all of them were dangerous, but just how few were dangerous is very this actually surprised me, and it wasn't until I read this study in 2022. Worldwide, 88 of the 3,500 ish are known vectors of human disease, with about 243 potential vectors. So you're looking at only about 2.5% of all the mosquitoes in the whole world are ones that we know cause human disease, and less than 10% of all mosquitoes in the whole world cause human disease, right? So what the heck? Like we're calling them all mosquitoes, we're calling them all dangerous, but we're lumping them all together as this group of insects that we thought for sure all did one thing, right? We were pretty sure that they all drank blood and they all caused disease, right? Reality is that that's not really the case. Although Massachusetts, because we have such a small number of mosquito, 51, right, or 52, that's a much larger percentage. So 15 are known vectors here in Massachusetts of the 51 or so. So that's about 29%, right? Worldwide, that to me was a mind blowing figure that we're blaming the most hated insect on what less than 10% of the population does. They again kind of going along with the variation in habitats and where you can find them. That you can find them virtually everywhere, right? There's that saying, from Field of Dreams, right? If you build it, they will come. Well, with mosquitoes, if there's water, they will come. Pretty much, they're one of the first things that will colonize water if you leave out standing water. They're one of the first things to arrive at water. They're very opportunistic when it comes to taking advantage of open, still water. They're just good at filling in those niches and taking advantage of them. I think that can best be kind of epitomized by the Asian tiger mosquito, where it's very, very well adapted to human-dominated environments. This is an aggressive day-biting mosquito, and you can see that I have the photo of this tire that was left out in the woods. That's a perfect habitat for Asian tiger mosquito. If you leave like a styrofoam or a plastic Dunkin' Donuts cup out on the side of the road and that fills with water, perfect breeding habitat for Asian tiger mosquito. It doesn't take a whole lot for mosquitoes to colonize an area. You just need a little bit of sun, a little bit of warmth, water, and a little bit of organic material that they can feed off of, and they're good to go. It's like a kind of build your own mosquito. You just put those ingredients and you get a mosquito. It pops right out. But there are some mosquitoes that are much more picky about the habitats, right? We have the eastern treehole mosquito, Ochlorotatus triceriatus. It's a fun mosquito name to say. And given its name, its common name, you can kind of gather that it lives in tree holes. This is where it lives. So if like your red maples, they can form these tree holes, and a lot of your other hardwoods form these tree holes. That's what this mosquito prefers. In fact, there's a whole ecology to what goes on within those tree holes. And part of it, showing in this bottom photo, are not mosquitoes, but skirted beetles. And these beetles might actually play a significant role in the ecology of this particular mosquito. These beetles may be the first things to digest leaf material, and then the bits that they cut in smaller bits that they either excrete as waste material or chew up, the mosquito larvae are then able to eat more rapidly and grow quicker. So it's possible that there's maybe a symbiotic relationship between this mosquito and this beetle. Again, all going on within a tiny world within that tree hole, developing that this mosquito is developing inside, right? Black-tailed mosquito, one of the most famous mosquitoes for triple E. I had to bring this up because this mosquito, it breeds in underground crypts. And if that's not like this kind of horror, scary mosquito black, it's kind of cool. It's got that, it's very metal, this mosquito. I really like it. And you've got this, you can see they're in the bottom photo, they got this white plastic dipper they're using to go underneath that the root mass of that tree. And they're looking for mosquito larvae in there. And you can see in the top photo, and this is from Wellfleet, all of those mounds, so let me back up. All of the mounds you see in the top photo, those are all root balls. Those are not mounds of dirt. So as these trees grow, there's organic debris that kind of gathers on top, and moss and stuff grows, but mosquitoes find a way underneath that and into the ground. And it's very, very difficult for humans to even access it, but tiny little mosquitoes, they do find a way. Another example of habitat preferences, the cattail mosquito. This mosquito as a larva, so most mosquitoes, what you'll find is they'll float at the surface. Their siphons kind of tilted towards the surface, right? So they can breathe. But this cattail mosquito will actually insert that into the root of cattails, and it will get all of its oxygen and everything through that. So it doesn't need to come up for air. There are mosquitoes found in oases in the desert. Mosquitoes found in the alpine zones of mountains. Ocleritatis pilatus found, 2,300 to 3,400 meters above sea level. You've got even right here in Massachusetts, that I think is one of the more fascinating mosquitoes, the purple pitcher plant mosquito, Weomia smithi. This mosquito lives inside as a developing larva inside the purple pitcher plant. And unlike most carnivorous plants, this carnivorous plant, it doesn't digest the insects that fall into it the way other carnivorous plants do. It has a symbiotic relationship with Weomia smithi, the purple pitcher plant mosquito, and that's how it gets its nutrients. So first, any hapless insect will fall into this pitcher plant, right? And the mosquito larvae, what they do is they will break down that insect, and then their waste products are what the purple pitcher plant will ingest. So you can think of this as like the probiotics of a purple pitcher plant. It's like the gut bacteria for this carnivorous plant. Very, very cool. And this mosquito, you probably never see because it doesn't bite people. It gets all of the nutrients it needs from its carnivorous lifestyle living within this pitcher plant. Very, very cool. They've even got some of these purple pitcher plants in some of the restored habitat in tin marsh, for instance. You can find them in tin marsh. You can find them in different restored areas. That it's a sign of good health for the environment for sure. And it's a cool mosquito that you can point out because it doesn't bite people. They have feeding preferences, differences in feeding preferences. So we kind of know that mosquitoes as these things that suck blood, right? Most prefer warm-blooded vertebrates, like this northern house mosquito. It loves biting people, loves biting birds, right? But you've got some that feed on amphibians and reptiles, like this northern frog-biting mosquito. And you've got one really weird mosquito that feeds on worms, including leeches. This is Eurytania sapphirina, and it's supposedly of no risk to humans because it only really feeds on worms. I guess there are some historical accounts of it biting people, but it's pretty rare, so it's not a significant vector. And I think it's really pretty. It might be really hard to see from this angle, but it's got these really bright fluorescent blue bands on it. Very surprising. And kind of an ironic twist of fate, right? So the bloodsucker sucking the bloodsucker. Other feeding preferences, the elephant mosquito, Toxorhynchites rutilis. This is a mosquito that doesn't feed on people. It doesn't drink blood. It feeds on other mosquitoes as a larva. And because it's getting all the nutrients it needs at that stage for egg production and biological functions, it can just survive on plant nectar from that point on. Overwintering stages. This might come as a surprise. This is one of the things that I always like to say, did you know? Because and you see on the kind of on this bottom photo, most people think like, oh, a hard frost is going to kill all the mosquitoes, right? And you're not going to see any mosquitoes. Unfortunately, we haven't gotten too much snow, but a lot of people are like, at least there's no mosquitoes, right? I want you to take a look at this. So this chart, what this chart shows is what life stage each of these genera, like different species within the genera, overwinter as. So when you see these numbers inside the red circle, that's adult, right? Which means that you've got 3 species of Culicida, 8 of Culex, and 11 of Anopheles overwintering as adults. There are adult mosquitoes still around here. You just have to find them. They're not going to want to find you. You have to find them. And that's not, this chart is not comprehensive, right? It's just to show you some examples of the different stages that the mosquitoes overwinter as. Different times of day that they're active. You got Aedes albopictus is primarily a day-biting mosquito. Culex pipiens is more crepuscular, more night-biting mosquito. Anopheles stevensii, typically a night-biting mosquito. So they're pretty much biting around the clock, but they can vary depending on what time of day. It's going to be different mosquitoes. And each of these mosquitoes, depending on where you live, is going to carry a different risk of a different disease, right? So it varies. So when people say things, when you hear advice about like limit your activity to certain times of day, they're trying to hedge their bets away from certain diseases, right? Because you can never avoid mosquitoes completely. There's always going to be some around. This is one of the reasons why I kind of wanted to bring up this conversation, right? Again, as a philosophical argument. So mosquito eradication, we're kind of at the doorstep of this, right? We kind of have the power to do this. Not yet, but I would say within our lifetimes, this could be a reality, right? You've got things like CRISPR-based gene drives, and I'm not going to go too far into that. It's a completely different rabbit hole, but it does give kind of the capability of eliminating an entire species just by introducing some genetically modified insects into the population, which is kind of scary to think of. And if for any reason, maybe that gives people a little bit of hesitation just because it's so final. It's just like, once you hit that button, it's done, right? But there's a lot to think of, right? There's a lot to think of. Would it be something that would be worth it, right? So let's talk about, and maybe a lot of you are already shaking your heads no, but just to kind of entertain kind of the topic, and because I need to talk for a little bit longer, we're going to talk about what mosquitoes do for the environment. What roles do they play? Especially given, the biodiversity crisis that we're in, is it worth it to lose another species, despite how annoying that species can possibly be? I skipped to hold on one second. Something weird happened. Okay. All right. Back here. Sorry for the technical difficulties. So first off, mosquitoes are filter feeders, right? This is not unique. If we lost mosquitoes, something else would probably fill in as a filter feeder. But in some locations, they can make up a substantial amount of biomass, right? You can see in this pan on the right, there are a lot of mosquitoes that are filter feeding in this area, and that can be significant when you think of it. They can be food for birds. In this study conducted in 2010 in France, they found that insect-eating martins were tracked, right? And those in the area after a spray laid 2 eggs versus those outside the spray laid 3 eggs. So, and this was a spray that was just used. It was a spray with BT that was only killing mosquitoes, right? So they knew that they were only impacting mosquitoes and not other types in midges closely related to mosquitoes. But it wasn't impacting like dragonflies or butterflies or anything, and still caused a reduction in the number of eggs laid by these martins. So as food for birds, so even birds might be affected a little bit as well. Food for fish, hundreds of fish consume mosquitoes, including this. This is the mosquito fish. This is a fish that is highly adapted to catching mosquitoes. In fact, it's considered invasive in a lot of areas because it's so good at outcompeting other fish. And so it's not a good fish to introduce as like into certain. You definitely don't want to go out and buy it as like a biological control, right? Um, but it's a very aggressive mosquito eating fish. But it does depend on mosquitoes. So I mean, this fish would probably not do very well without mosquitoes. And food for other insects, like in this particular study done in 2012, they listed a bunch of insects you can see on the right. I'm not going to list them all off, but these are known insects that feed on other, you know, these are, in the Diptera and the Hemiptera, these are known to feed on other types of mosquitoes, right? Let me see if I got this chart right. I think this makes sense. Yeah. As food for other mosquitoes. Yeah, so we talked about Toxorhynchides, the elephant mosquito, and you can see the it eating another mosquito right here. But there are other mosquito larvae that eat other mosquito larvae as well. Like this is Saurophora ciliata, and you can see I wanted to show this video of Saurophora ciliata eating another mosquito. It's kind of cool. But yes. Un Unfortunately, bats, it's a little bit overstated. So bats actually don't, of all the creatures that I've listed, bats actually do not really eat mosquitoes at all. So when it comes to what eats mosquitoes, it's not bats. It's a lot of other things, but it's not bats. But I feel like with bats, you shouldn't need another reason to love them. They're cool enough. They're a flying mammal for crying out loud, you know? They're really flipping cool. And so I love them no matter what, even if they don't eat mosquitoes. Uh, Mosquitoes also take nectar, and so they're effectively pollinators. So males and females both will feed from flowers, and they actually pretty much need nectar. So if they don't get nectar within 4 days of emergence, most mosquitoes will die. Emergence being coming out from a pupa. Um, and a few species of mosquito rely solely on nectar and don't feed on blood at all. And it's only the females that sometimes take blood. Sometimes they take blood for for all batches of eggs. Sometimes they take blood only for eggs laid after the first batch. And they're after more than just sugar within the nectar. There are all these other nutrients like amino acids and stuff that the mosquitoes are going to take from the plant, from the flower's nectar. So they really depend on these flowers. It's really, really important. And I love this. You can see in this photo, again, one of my favorite mosquitoes, the Saurophora ferox, and you can see it's covered in pollen grains right on this goldenrod. So it's going a pretty good job pollinating. Some people call them nectar robbers, but I'd say that's a pollinator right there. It's pretty darn covered with pollen. And I watched this mosquito go from flower to flower. There's even one flower, at least that I know of, that is exclusively mosquito pollinated. And this is I'm not going to bother trying to pronounce this right now. I apologize too. I'm battling with the flu at the moment. So my brain is in a little bit of a haze as we speak. But this is exclusively mosquito pollinated. There are other considerations to why mosquito eradication might not necessarily be a good thing. Let's take the Arctic, for example. Mosquito swarms in the Arctic can be devastating. If you look at this person, I know she's smiling, but these are all mosquitoes out there. They've got a few species of mosquito that all emerge all at once, and they emerge in these huge, huge clouds, right? It's to the point where caribou are thought to select paths facing the wind to avoid these mosquitoes, right? So so you think about what caribou do, and I want to show you. Look at this picture of this slope, right? These are all caribou, right? You think about that, what they're doing here, right? They're transporting nutrients, they're trampling ground, they're eating and pooping, they're altering general ecology, they're doing all of this. So where this mass of caribou goes can be very significant to how it shapes what's going on in the Arctic tundra, right? And if you were to eliminate mosquitoes here and that all of a sudden changed this path of these caribou, what would that do? What would the wolves do? You know, what would happen? I don't know. I think that that's probably something that we probably don't want to know. On the other hand, mosquitoes really are the world's deadliest animal, right? You can see in this photo, this kind of infographic, the mosquitoes kill more people than people kill people. And almost as many people die from malaria as people die from other people, which is crazy to think of. So mosquitoes really are very, very deadly, right? Again, that's kind of the point of my disclaimer. And when I was thinking about this, and it made me wonder is, has any, and I don't know if this is true, it's just a question, right? Has any other animal been as influential on humans as mosquitoes, right? We even have a gene in some humans, sickle cell trait, that we've evolved because of mosquitoes. This sickle cell trait, if you're heterozygous for it, you become resistant to malaria, and you only get you can see in the center image, and you only get mild sickle cell disease, right? So this trait evolved to survive in areas where malaria was spread, right? To be able to not die from mosquitoes. That's wild to think of. I don't know if we have any other traits that are kind of like that. Maybe we do. Maybe someone can enlighten me, and maybe we do. But it had me thinking that mosquitoes really are that serious, right? They really are that intense. So if we eradicated mosquitoes, what would happen, right? Well, various plants, fish, birds, and other animals will be affected. Some may be more affected than others. What's interesting in this article published in Nature in 2010 by Janet Fang, she concluded that probably something else would fill in. I'm not sure about that. I mean, maybe, but I'm not 100% sure that things would just fill in and be okay. And the pros, though, there would be a lot more people on this planet. And other wildlife would probably see benefit too, such as birds. I mean, there's a lot of birds that die to all these viruses, right? You have birds that die to West Nile virus all the time. And just other, it can happen. So those birds, they'd probably be doing a lot better. So it becomes, again, a very gray topic, right? I also want to talk about how things changed to affect, how have humans changed things to affect mosquitoes, right? So we've got urbanization, deforestation, and agriculture, right? A lot of what we call I'm going to blank on it. I really apologize, folks. I'm not at my finest tonight. We're just going to call this urbanization, deforestation, and agriculture. So these are a few studies, right? Does this, how do these affect mosquitoes? So in this study in 2022, they found that there was a decline in overall diversity within mosquitoes. However, a few species thrived. And what's interesting, kind of an interesting takeaway from this, is the species that survived, a lot of them are nuisance biting mosquitoes, and mosquitoes associated with human habitats and human diseases. So the ones that we don't really want, right? So that's kind of the take home from this study. In the Amazon, they ran a similar study, and what they found is an overall decline in diversity as you kind of went up this rural-urban gradient and kind of changed the land, developed the land more in favor for humans. They found there was a decline in overall mosquito diversity, but there was an increased abundance of Anopheles darlingi, the primary vector of malaria. Wow, that's crazy to me. So, you got to think about what humans are doing, and maybe we're the cause of this, right? With urbanization, you find that as you move from even just a suburban environment into an urban environment, Aedes albopictus has been associated with socioeconomic status. It's been associated with increased abandonment and trash, and even construction could be allowing Anopheles stevensii to overwinter in cities. And you can see, in this photo here on the right, you can see these people with their dippers, and they're looking at this tarp that is a perfect breeding habitat for mosquitoes. Artificial light at night. No light pollution. And there was one study, no light pollution, they found almost no West Nile virus risk. Low light pollution, risk went way, way up. So something to consider when you leave your lights on at night is that mosquitoes might like the dark a little bit better than having just your porch light on. Um, and the artificial light at night may actually be interfering with diapause in mosquitoes as well. It's unclear what impacts that could have. That study was only recently published, but if it's changing something, we're not sure where that could go. Where that could go. It could be good or it could be bad. Changes to wetlands from this one study in 2014, and maybe you guys at NSRWA know a little bit better than me, have different figures. But I pulled this figure and I thought it was kind of shocking. Is that there was an estimated 62 to 75% of inland and coastal wetlands worldwide have been changed since the 1900s. That to me is crazy. So we've changed a lot of our wetlands around, and hopefully we can change some of that back. But what does restoring wetlands do? How does that affect mosquitoes? Well, there is West Nile virus risk, at least in one study, associated with restored wetlands. But I'll be honest, and I didn't come up with a lot. I could have done a little bit more research on this, could have done a little bit more reading. But this is what I came up with, and maybe some people may again have more to say on this. But this was an interesting study I pulled this from, and they found that overall mosquito abundance decreased in constructed wetlands. And so what they mean by constructed is the wetlands there were they were not there before. It wasn't like a wetland. It was someone like maybe made a drainage ditch, or they made something on maybe some kind of aquaculture, or they built something there that wasn't there naturally, right? So mosquito abundance, so that actually, I apologize. So that actually say overall mosquito abundance decreased in non-constructed wetlands. So the mosquito abundance decreased in locations where there had previously been wetlands. So if you took an area that used to be wetlands and restored it back to its normal former area, there was decreased abundance in mosquitoes. But mosquito abundance increased in constructed wetlands, and that would be wetlands that were artificially created that hadn't been there before. I hope that makes sense. I know I kind of went back and forth. If anyone has questions about that, I could type that out and I'd be happy to clarify. Mosquitoes may vary in response to restoration efforts. One of the questions that these people did ask, and I did not follow up, they published their study in 2022, and I didn't see if they had followed up from there, is they talked about which mosquitoes increase in abundance, and were they ones associated with disease? Were they ones that were associated with nuisance biting? We don't know. It's still kind of an open question. This study was, it was published in 2022. It was a review. So they pooled the information from a bunch of different studies, and they found that in some cases, the nuisance biting mosquitoes went up. In some cases, they were replaced by non-nuisance biting mosquitoes. So there's a lot of nuance and a lot of details that are kind of lacking. So it's interesting to kind of try to maybe tease apart that, maybe some low-hanging fruit for a grad student to kind of explore. It had me thinking, that's for sure. So I'll end with this, and I'll say, hopefully this has made you more interested in mosquitoes. Maybe it's made you think a little bit more about them. I'm hoping that it's made you appreciate at least their diversity as maybe more than just blood-sucking bad guys. And perhaps, maybe we could use more explicit language regarding mosquitoes. Like, instead of just calling mosquitoes, maybe call some vectors, some nuisances, and maybe some just like non-human vectors, or maybe we can just call them something different instead of lumping them all together. And final thoughts and final questions, I'd be happy to entertain at this point. Again, I kind of apologize. I'm coming out of a pretty serious flu here, and it's still a little bit like slightly delusional. So I'm glad you guys stuck with me throughout the presentation.
No, fantastic talk, Blake. No, thanks so much for working it out. We do have some questions here. So Blake, I'll just start going down the list if that's all right with you.
Sure.
All right. Yeah, once again, Blake, fantastic talk as always. So, for all the mosquito spraying that's going on by professionals as well as maybe uninformed people, is there the possibility that mosquitoes could develop a resistance to some of the spraying and mosquito control that's going on out there? Good question, by the way.
Yes, with any kind of spray of any chemical, there is a chance, as long as evolution exists, there's a chance for resistance, right? Because it just is something that's going to happen, right? And in fact, there are what at least our mosquito control programs will do is they do resistance testing and resistance monitoring for mosquitoes. So they'll sample populations and they will test them in a bioassay, a bottle bioassay. You can kind of look that up, the CDC bottle bioassay, and they'll test that to see if resistance is building up to something like a pyrethroid in that particular mosquito population. Um, when it comes to some of your backyard sprayers or kind of like your private applicators, they're I don't think they're doing bottle bioassays. I don't think they're testing for resistance, but they are probably contributing to it, but with their spray. Um, so yeah, so that's your answer. There are a few chemicals that are have been pretty hard for mosquitoes to become resistant to more than others, like the BTI products and stuff. But I do believe I read something that there are some mosquitoes that are becoming resistant to BTI. Um, I'd have to really dig that up. Again, my head's cloudy, and I don't really want to say anything yes or no right now. Commit to it before, but I think I remember reading something on that. But pretty much anything, it could happen.
Okay, great. Thanks, Blake. Why do mosquitoes seem to bother and bite some more than others? If there's scientific data that supports that.
They don't know. There's been a lot of research on this and a lot of people asking that question. And I can tell you for almost certain it's not blood type. What it is there are other considerations, and what a lot of people do believe it has to do with um, so there, for instance, there's some data that shows that they might be attracted to if you're sick. They might be more attracted to, like, they might be able to detect, like, for me, if I have a fever, right, and I'm sick, I might be more attractive to mosquitoes. If maybe everyone has their own, it might sound a little gross, but their own bacteria on their bodies and in their sweat. Um, that's giving off certain odors that maybe are not detectable to people, but would be detectable to mosquitoes. So they do think that it could have to do with some different scents that are imperceptible to humans that are perceptible to mosquitoes that might make them more attractive to others. You could be someone that just tends to run hot. I'm someone who really tends to run cold. I'm always very cold, but my wife, she always runs really hot. And so whenever we go on walks, she's just swarmed by mosquitoes. So it could just even be, mosquitoes tend to be more attracted to darker colors. Could be something that you're wearing. Um, it could be a number of different things. But they don't really know. It just, I think, kind of a cop out answer, but probably the reality of it is that there's probably a confluence of factors that come together that make mosquitoes more attracted to one particular individual.
Thanks, Blake. That's pretty fascinating. Could you, and if you don't, I might have some comments on this question. I could help field this one. But could you comment on Massachusetts' effort to create drainage ditches in tidal marshes during the 50s and 60s? So the mosquito, what we would consider mosquito ditches. And I know it wasn't just the 1950s and 60s, but do you
Yeah.
have any perspective on that, Blake?
Um, I, I should have come prepared for that type of question. I just attended a presentation at one of the mosquito control meetings, and this guy had this amazing presentation on the whole history of marsh modification with mosquitoes here in Massachusetts. And I wish I could just like channel him for a moment, but it's I don't know. I'm gonna say I think I'm gonna push that off to you, Brian, in lieu of not being able to channel that guy.
Well, and I can only speak for what I have been told. We did have a great presentation 2 years ago by Dr. Sarah Grady and Susan Adamovich uh, from the North Shore. Oh, what's the department? I'm sorry, I can't off the top of my head, but There was salt marsh manipulation that had been going on ever since the European arrival, and possibly prior. But from what I was told, some ditching was there for the salt hay farming, as well as then later for what was hoped to be mosquito control, as well as part of the Citizen Conservation Corps, part of the New Deal during the 30s, to get people back to work. And so there was thought that there could be some mosquito remediation involved in those ditchings, which obviously I'm I pretty sure that it really doesn't. And in fact, it really kind of undermines and can disrupt the marsh from the inside out. So, but there was some ditching going on prior to that, for salt hay farming practices. But certainly it did happen in the 30s as well. So, and from what I have learned and have been told, it's not good for the marshes at all. So, um, besides using chemicals for mosquitoes, is there a way to get rid or control mosquitoes, like with predators, BioBT, etc.? And are there diseases that affect mosquitoes? Kind of a
Um,
two-parter.
so they're just looking for, I mean, they're looking for a non-chemical way to get rid of mosquitoes. I mean, that's what I was just kind of talking about. Is so the gene drive, CRISPR-based gene drive technology is completely chemical. It's not a chemical. That's just you're just releasing a GMO mosquito into the population, and this mosquito will have like maybe some kind of like deleterious allele or something. And that the way that works is that most of the time people pass on, you pass on 50% of your genes to your offspring, right? And then they pass on 50%. This is the way this works is that the gene drive, it creates SNPs in the genetic code so that it replaces the 50%. So now you're passing on 100% of your genes to the offspring. So it will eventually over time replace the full suite of genetic traits within a population. And if that trait is something like you die or you can't or you can't you do something or you can't do something a certain way, you're born without wings or eyes or something, that could cause an entire population to become extinct, right? So it's basically a way to make a GMO self-perpetuating within a population, which is kind of crazy. Um, so that would be chemical free, and that to me is way scarier than chemicals. um, so yeah, there are chemical free ways of doing that. BTI is still chemical. It's still a poison, still a stomach toxin, but is relatively targeted at mosquitoes and maybe some midges. Um, and so that's one of the things. The big thing about with any of these chemicals or any kind of pesticide is that, and what I hope that I was kind of getting across to people is that mosquitoes are so varied and there's so many different kinds. They're active at different times of year. They're active at different times of day. That the idea is maybe you want to, instead of just saying kill mosquitoes, think about which mosquitoes you want to kill, right? And target those particular areas, right? What is it that I want to get rid of? Do I want to get rid of all mosquitoes, or do I want to get rid of the ones that are biting me when I'm out by my swimming pool, right? Think about what you're trying to get rid of and try to target that stuff, right? Or maybe I don't want to get rid of those, or maybe I just want to protect my kids from like triple E or something, like that's more that I didn't really want to make this a debate on chemicals, but that's kind of my opinion.
Thanks, Blake. Understood. I recall the Zika scare of 2016 when that was sensationalized in the media. Florida was targeted as an area where the virus-carrying mosquitoes existed and breeding areas were sprayed. Why don't we hear about Zika anymore? And what harm can mass spraying cause? Having a company treat
Yes.
your backyard for mosquitoes, etc. Good question.
Um, so Zika was pretty scary. Unfortunately, it's like one of those things where like I think that I'm gonna have to choose my words pretty carefully here. Um, so with Zika, coming from someone who kind of knows, or not knows, but like I guess looking back retrospectively at the situation, Zika is never really a concern up here in Massachusetts, right? And so you think about like Florida and you think about Texas and really like parts of, not outside the continental US, right? Maybe like the US Virgin Islands or something like that, like different places like that, right? U.S. territories. Those were areas of the United States where Zika was a very real and serious problem, right? It was a really real and serious threat. It got blown up around the entire United States, right? And like some good came of that, and some good, some of it you can just be like, oh, that was so much hype. Like, why did they get us all nervous? But it actually generated a lot of funding and a lot of research into mosquitoes as vectors, into what could possibly happen. So it did a lot of good, even though I think as a general public, you're like, oh, you got us rallied up for nothing. But it actually amounted to a lot of good work and good research. And some of that includes things like our centers of excellence, our centers of vector-borne disease that are stationed around the country. Part of that was because of Zika, right? Um, so I mean, it did, and those centers of excellence deal with more than just Zika. They deal with like tick-borne diseases and all different kinds of things that come down the pipeline. So it's part of it. Like the media and the press kind of blew up Zika, but that generated funding and like public awareness, and then that also created all these good things that came out of it. So I think it was, on one hand, I'm like, oh, you pulling my leg for nothing, and on the other hand, it's like, oh, well, this is a good thing, right? Just kind of the way funding works in science, right? You kind of have to do stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like I mean, if you're familiar with honeybees, kind of like the whole idea, like honeybees generate a lot of funding actually for native bee research. Believe it or not. For instance, at my lab, we started testing bumblebees, and we started doing work with bumblebees and osmia because of honeybees. Because people were concerned about honeybees, we were able to do work for bumblebees. It is what it is.
The scientific world works sometimes.
Yeah.
There's a question about if you could provide the reference for the study about the constructed and restored mosquitoes, uh,
Yes.
followed by a
Yes.
great presentation comment. Um,
Oh, okay.
if you could type, you could put that in the chat, if you can, Blake, that would be, or yeah, if you pull it up or highlight it,
Yeah.
um,
Where is it?
that'd be great. There's a lot of comments here, Blake, about amazing presentations and that, and so thanks
This.
everyone for all your
So
questions.
it's this one at the bottom. It's Dworak et al. 2022.
All right, hopefully everyone can see
And yeah,
that.
that's such a major typo. It should say non-constructed in that first one.
Good, good catch. Good catch. And if anyone has any questions specific, Blake, you can send any questions to me and then I can forward them to Blake for a response. Is there an annual registration for no mosquito spray, like by county?
Yeah, you can get on a no spray list. If you talk to the mosquito control, they can put you on a no spray list.
Great. What can we do in our backyards to favor the non-vector mosquitoes versus the vector mosquitoes?
I don't know. I'm not sure because it's because our backyards. If you think about the way your rural suburban habitat, I'm assuming is kind of set up, it already favors a human biting mosquito environment. There's already going to be a lot of human biting mosquitoes that are going to be just really want to live in that area. It's already going to be like pretty heavily modified, and so I'm not sure. But I mean, it is possible that um, again, that could be a good research topic. Maybe there is something that people can do in and around their yards to favor different mosquito types.
Mhm.
I'm not sure. Good question.
It's a good question. Is there a good organic mosquito repellent that you would recommend?
One you trust, because they're not regulated by EPA. It means that they're not tested for either safety or efficacy, right? So if you have one that you like, use it, or if you have one that you've heard people like, then you can use it. Otherwise, or you can just buy a bunch and then test them out and see which ones work, and then you can do the testing on your own. Because they're not regulated, it means that any company can sell you stuff and it doesn't have to work, or it could work. I don't know, right? So it's kind of like the Wild West organic sprays, right? So you just want to buy one and with a good reputation and stick with that.
Interesting. Um, and thanks, Blake, for fielding these questions. There's a lot of good ones here. and maybe you answered this one early on. As far as population and biomass, what percentage of mosquitoes are vectors for human disease as compared to the 29 or so percent of the population? Does that make sense?
Which percentage of mosquitoes are vectors for disease?
Yes.
So it was about 29% of the mosquito 29% of the total species are vectors for human disease. So the remaining 70-ish% are not vectors of human disease.
Okay. Okay. I hope that answers that question.
I hope
Thank,
so.
yeah. Um, let's see. Do Okay, so someone's interested in urban ecology of mosquitoes. Do the tall buildings
Oh.
impact mosquito predation?
Ooh, interesting. I don't know. That's really interesting. I guess another rabbit hole for me to go down. Tall building. I'm not sure.
That's
That's really interesting. Great question. I'm
that's
not sure.
that's a good question. That seems like a great case study right there.
Yeah.
Can citrus oil safely spilled on water sources help kill off mosquito ha larva hatches?
Oil in general can do that because it's gonna mess with the surface tension on the water, and that will disrupt mosquito development. So you can't do that.
Okay. Okay. Um, let's see. So someone has experienced is mosquito population and other flying insects has been markedly reduced over the past few years. Um, so he's got someone has some figures here. Do you have or can you share, if so, total Massachusetts mosquito population figures for the past few years?
Oh, total mosquito populations?
Ye-
No, no, we don't. You're asking about all the mosquito population, so the numbers of mosquitoes. Um, I don't have that.
if you see like there's someone in the
Interesting.
questions that put
Yeah, that's
some
interesting.
data.
I definitely don't have that. No, I don't have
Okay.
that information.
Okay. Is there a way, like, if folks are interested, is there like a place that you could direct folks to, Blake, if they have further?
It's possible that our mosquito control may have that information on file, but at least what I know about mosquito surveillance is that they run pooled samples, right? So what that means is that they're going to take it could be like one mosquito or it could be like 13 mosquitoes, and then they'll mush that all up, right? And that'll just be one pool that they'll test. So even within mosquito testing, they're not counting individual mosquitoes usually. They're just testing a pool, right? So even if you go out and you collect, hundreds of mosquitoes, right? You're just collecting from a certain area. So it just is would be a really weird data point to gather for me, but it's possible that if other states are doing that, that's a tremendous amount of work. I don't think our mosquito control is doing that. Um, because you'd be counting every single mosquito, right? And then just to mush them up into a pool. And then and then that data and then but that would only be for a specific location at a specific time of day at a specific time of year, and it wouldn't be tracked for the entire year. So it just I don't I just think it's a lot of effort and a lot of energy that I don't think our mosquito control is doing.
Hmm.
But it's possible. I mean, I could get you in touch with them. Ellen Bidlack would be the one to contact. She's the one she does a lot of the surveillance. So um, she would be able to let me know.
Okay. And this is all through the Plymouth County Extension would be sort of the point of contact to go
Nope,
through?
it would be mosquito control.
Gotcha. Okay.
You'd go through mosquito control.
Okay. Thanks, Blake. How do CRISPR-altered genes get introduced into the environment to target mosquitoes?
So you would introduce a mosquito. So CRISPR, so the gene drive is what is the gene. It's called a selfish gene. CRISPR is a gene editing technology, right? So that's what it's called, right? And so you would create this like basically this gene edited mosquito, right? And so then it would be people that would just let that go. The people that would let the GMO into the environment. So you'd create a lot of these mosquitoes and you dump them into the environment. So the idea behind it.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Blake. Okay. So in regards to that previous question about the 29%, I think someone says, I think they're trying to help me clarify, that the question was what percent of the biomass of mosquitoes is the
Biomass.
29%, is the 29% of species that are vectors for disease?
I don't know about biomass.
And
I'm
thanks
not
for that
sure about
clarification.
biomass. Yeah. I was doing percentages of species, so I'm
Okay.
not sure what the biomass would be.
Okay. And thanks for that clarification out there. Do electric zappers work against mosquitoes, or are moths just the real and unfortunate target of those?
Yeah, that it's the latter. They don't really work
Oh,
against mosquitoes, and it's killing a lot of other insects, moths, and
oh,
a lot of other stuff. Yeah, a lot of other good stuff.
oh.
Um, yeah. There was one study, and I think they were showing that it was mostly all moths, but then they were like, well, maybe mosquitoes are just too small that there's nothing left of them by the time that they went to clean them out. But I think they'd kind of determined at the end of it that it wasn't really effective against mosquitoes at all.
How long do mosquitoes live?
Depends on the species. Um, some mosquitoes can live for a few weeks, but you get some, like I mentioned, overwinter as adults. So they're going to spend the whole winter as an adult, which is months long, right? Several months. So it really depends on that species, what you're talking about. For so it's gonna vary. It's gonna vary. And I hope that you kind of I impressed upon you how much variation can happen within mosquitoes.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Thanks, Blake. And it looks like maybe just hopefully, I'm sorry if I missed a question in there. Someone says, I assume droughts and wildfires have an impact on mosquito populations, probably as well as climate change. Is there a way to
Yes.
monitor the long-term effects?
Yes. Yeah, no, definitely climate change. Warm weather species, even changing things like how quickly mosquitoes can acquire and transmit a disease is all going to change with heat. It's going to have a huge impact. Floods. So droughts and wildfires, yes, but flooding is going to be like a major effect. So what typically happens, and what you may notice, is that if there's a flood, like let's say let's say in an area, you may have first the initial damage where everyone's trying to get out, right? Typically, about like a couple weeks afterward, when you have all the help on board getting everyone out, that's when all the mosquitoes will show up because they're usually floodwater mosquitoes, and they'll usually it'll trigger these mass emergences of all these mosquitoes that emerge because of that flood, right? But that usually happens at the same time that all this aid is coming to the people who need aid in these areas. So anything, and mosquitoes, at least what we realized is that they're very sensitive to disturbances. So again, they're very quick to capitalize on open and new water, and they're very adaptable, right? And so, um, anytime there's a lot of change, and climate change, droughts, wildfires, all that's going to create a lot more change, a lot of changes. Mosquitoes are going to thrive, right? Droughts maybe not as much, right? But I can see things like um, if it created shifts in, or wildfires created some shifts in certain areas, um it could definitely change things. Is there any way to monitor long-term effects? There are, but they're not easy, and it's one of those things where, like, we're asking these questions now, and to get long-term effects you need years and years. So if we ask them now, starting now, we can get what I would consider long-term effects. Will be something that might be like 10 years at least, maybe even longer. So you're looking at 2033, 2034, 2044 is what you have, like, at a minimum a long-term effect, maybe even longer. So we got to get started on this stuff.
Mm.
Um,
Thanks, Blake. Just a couple more. Thanks. We'll just see if we can go through all these. Other than tree swallows, dragonflies, what other creatures feed on mosquitoes? Someone was surprised to hear that bats really do not.
yeah, beetles, and there's some true bugs that feed on mosquitoes. A lot of things. What's interesting is I've never seen, those, so there's water striders, and these are insects that skate on the top of water. I've never seen one eat a mosquito. And you would think that that is an insect that should probably eat all the mosquitoes floating at the surface of water, and I have never seen that happen. But I wonder, I don't know if anyone can record that for me on as a photo or on video. I would love to see that. But a lot of things, I mean, a lot of things. It's just fish, especially a lot of fish, dragonflies, damselflies, true bugs, yeah,
Okay.
predaceous diving beetles.
Okay. I remember, Blake, you and I did a program a number of years ago with a group of kids, and we found a huge giant water bug when we were doing
Oh yes,
some sampling, as well as a water scorpion as well. Uh,
yes.
Great. That was a good program. Maybe just one more. And again, if we didn't get to all the questions, please feel free to email me, and I can send them to Blake and get you a direct response. So, but lastly, Blake, great presentation. What do you use as a mosquito repellent?
I use just regular DEET, honestly. I or picaridin. If I have picaridin, I'll use picaridin. Um, and for my kids, I use a lower percentage of either of them. So there's the there it's like something like 9%. So you don't need to use 100% of any of these products. In fact, I'd recommend that you not do that. It kind of caps at like 20% the level of protection. So you can drop that down pretty low and still get an effective amount of prevention. A lot of people think that like if they're not using the max, then they're not doing enough, I think. But believe it or not, if you put on 9%, and it's not going to protect against the worst mosquitoes, but if you got kids around and you just worried about a little bit of mosquito nuisance mosquitoes, that's usually going to do the job. And then I don't have to worry about like, burning my eyes or like stinging my lips and making them feel numb or whatever. Um, that's what I use. And then picaridin, it's nice that it doesn't have that smell. So if I have it on hand, I'll use picaridin. I do prefer that. But DEET is just cheaper and readily available in more shapes and sizes.
Okay. Thanks, Blake. Once again, it's just a fascinating presentation, and it's always great to learn from you and to hear what you have to say about this amazing world out there. So we really appreciate your
Thank
time,
you.
and thanks so much for joining us once again. So another big thank you to our sponsors, Clean Harbors, as well as Massachusetts Cultural Councils of Situate, Hanover, Marshfield, Pembroke, Rockland, Plymouth, and Duxbury. Thanks so much for your continued support. And thanks, Jackie and Mass Audubon, for joining us once again. We really appreciate this partnership year after year. So it's always great to be working with you guys down there as well. Um,
Thank you. This was great. Thank you, Blake. That was incredible.
Thank you.
Yeah, great job, Blake. And so please, thanks all of you out there. We had 101 people tuning in tonight. And so really appreciate your continued support and interest in our educational programs. So hopefully we'll see you again next week. February 14th, Canaries in a Coal Mine, Bird Migration and Climate Change, learning about how the impacts of climate change in our communities can affect the bird migrations, bird populations, and what the data is showing. So tune in next week for another really exciting and amazing talk. Thanks, everyone out there. Thanks, Blake. Thanks, Jackie. And have a good night, everybody. So my name is Brian with the North South Rivers, and thanks for tuning in. Have a good night.